Anattā, or soullessness. This Buddhist doctrine of rebirth should be distinguished from the theory of reincarnation, which implies the transmigration of a soul and its invariable material rebirth. Buddhism denies the existence of an unchanging or eternal soul, created by a god or emanating from a divine essence, Paramatma. If the immortal soul, which is supposed to be the essence of man, is eternal, there cannot be either a rise or a fall. Besides, one cannot understand why different souls are so variously constituted at the outset. It should be said, writes Bertrand Russell, that the old distinction between soul and body has evaporated quite as much, because matter has lost its solidity, as mind has lost its spirituality. Psychology is just beginning to be scientific. In the present state of psychology, belief in immortality can at any rate claim no support from science. Buddhists do agree with Russell when he says, "There is obviously some reason in which I am the same person as I was yesterday." And, to take an even more obvious example, if simultaneously I see a man and hear him speaking, there is some sense in which the eye that sees is the same as the eye that hears. Till recently, scientists believed in an indivisible and indestructible atom. For sufficient reasons, physicists have reduced this atom to a series of events. For equally good reasons, psychologists find that mind is not the identity of a single continuing thing, but is a series of occurrences bound together by certain intimate relations. The question of immortality, therefore, has become the question whether these intimate relations exist between occurrences connected with the living body and other occurrences which take place after that body is dead. As C.E.M. Joad says in The Meaning of Life, matter has since disintegrated under our very eyes. It is no longer solid, it is no longer enduring. It is no longer determined by compulsive causal laws. And more important than all, it is no longer known. The so-called atoms, it seems, are both divisible and destructible. The electrons and protons that compose atoms can meet and annihilate one another, while their persistence, such as it is rather that of a wave, lacking fixed boundaries, and in process of continual change, both as regards shape and position, than that of a thing. Bishop Berkeley, who showed that this so-called atom is a metaphysical fiction, held that there exists a spiritual substance called the soul. Hume, for instance, looked into consciousness and perceived that there was nothing except fleeting mental states, and concluded that the supposed permanent ego is non-existent. There are some philosophers, he says, who imagine we are every moment conscious of what we call ourself, that we feel its existence and its continuance in existence, and so we are certain both of its perfect identity and simplicity. For my part, when I enter most intimately into what I call myself, I always stumble on some particular perception or other of heat or cold, light or shade, love or hatred, pain or pleasure. I never catch myself, and never can observe anything but the perception. nor do I conceive what is further requisite to make me a perfect non-entity. Bergson says, all consciousness is time existence. And a conscious state is not a state that endures without changing. It is a change without ceasing. When change ceases, it ceases. It is itself nothing but change. Dealing with this question of soul, Professor James says, the soul theory is a complete superfluity so far as accounting for the actually verified facts of conscious experience goes. So far, no one can be compelled to subscribe to it for definite scientific reasons. In concluding his interesting chapter on the soul, he says, and in this book, the provisional solution, which we have reached, must be the final word. The thoughts themselves are the thinkers. Watson, a distinguished psychologist, states, no one has ever touched a soul, or has seen one in a test tube, or has in any way come into relationship with it, as he has with the other objects of his daily experience. Nevertheless, to doubt its existence is to become a heretic, and once might possibly even had led to loss of one's head. Even today, a man holding a public position dare not question it. The Buddha anticipated these facts some 2,500 years ago. According to Buddhism, mind is nothing but a complex compound of fleeting mental states. One unit of consciousness consists of three phases: arising or genesis, Upada; static or development, Thiti; and cessation or dissolution, Bhanga. Immediately after the cessation stage of a thought moment, there occurs the genesis stage of the subsequent thought moment. Each consciousness of this ever-changing life process, on passing away, transmits its whole energy, all the indelibly recorded impressions, to its successor. Every fresh consciousness consists of the potentialities of its predecessors, together with something more. There is, therefore, a continuous flow of consciousness like a stream, without any interruption. The subsequent thought moment is neither absolutely the same as its predecessor, since that which goes to make it up is not identical, nor entirely another, being the same continuity of karmic energy. Here there is no identical being, but there is an identity in process. Every moment there is birth, every moment there is death. The arising of one thought moment means the passing away of another thought moment, and vice versa. In the course of one lifetime, there is momentary rebirth without a soul. It must not be understood that a consciousness is chopped up in bits and joined together like a train or a chain, but on the contrary, it persistently flows on like a river, receiving from the tributary streams of sense constant accretions to its flood, and ever dispensing to the world without it the thought stuff it has gathered by the way. It has birth for its source, and death for its mouth. The rapidity of the flow is such that hardly is there any standard whereby it can be measured even approximately. However, it pleases the commentators to say that the time duration of one thought moment is even less than 1/billionth part of the time occupied by a flash of lightning. Here we find a juxtaposition of such fleeting mental states of consciousness, opposed to a superposition of such states, as some appear to believe. No state once gone ever recurs, nor is identical with what goes before. But we, worldlings, veiled by the web of illusion, mistake this apparent continuity to be something eternal, and go to the extent of introducing an unchanging soul, Anatta, the supposed doer and receptacle of all actions, to this ever-changing consciousness. The so-called being is like a flash of lightning that is resolved into a succession of sparks that follow upon one another with such rapidity that the human retina cannot perceive them separately, nor can the uninstructed conceive of such succession of separate sparks. As the wheel of a cart rests on the ground at one point, so does the being live only for one thought moment. It is always in the present and is ever slipping into the irrevocable past. What we shall become is determined by this present thought moment. If there is no soul, what is it that is reborn? One might ask. Well, there is nothing to be reborn. When life ceases, the kalmic energy rematerializes itself in another form. As Bhikkhu Silacharya says, unseen it passes whithersoever. The conditions appropriate to its visible manifestation are present. Here showing itself as a tiny gnat or worm, there making its presence known in the dazzling magnificence of a deva or an archangel's existence. When one mode of its manifestation ceases, it merely passes on, and where suitable circumstances offer, reveals itself afresh in another name or form. Birth is the arising of the psychophysical phenomena. Death is merely the temporary end of a temporary phenomenon. Just as the arising of a physical state is conditioned by a preceding state as its cause, so the appearance of psychophysical phenomena is conditioned by causes anterior to its birth. As the process of one lifespan is possible without a permanent entity, passing from one thought moment to another, so a series of life processes is possible without an immortal soul to transmigrate from one existence to another. Buddhism does not totally deny the existence of a personality in an empirical sense. It only attempts to show that it does not exist in an ultimate sense. The Buddhist philosophical term for an individual is sarantana, that is, a flux or a continuity. It includes the mental and physical elements as well. The karmic force of each individual binds the elements together. This uninterrupted flux or continuity of psychophysical phenomenon, which is conditioned by Kamma, and not limited only to the present life, but having its source in the beginningless past, and its continuation in the future, is the Buddhist substitute for the permanent ego or the immortal soul of other religions.